Welcome back to another Trade Alts technical analysis video. Today we're going to focus on Bitcoin. I waited to do this video until monthly close, which was 48 minutes ago. I wanted to make sure I had the newest data available. And, it was a really interesting month. And, basically we got this new monthly at $82,534 confirmed. I do think that over the course of May, we are going to challenge at least one of these monthly levels. So I'm kind of looking at this more of like a monthly range. But it's also possible that we see both, and that wouldn't surprise me that much either. So anyway, we've had a really nice move off of the low. Since we've made our high, we came down, like this trend line, coming back from your August low here after this nice consolidation. I mean, this was like a ridiculously long consolidation. Ended up, making new all-time highs. Since then, we've had a nice pullback. Basically retested our prior all-time high coming back from March of last year. And we've had a really, what was that, $20,000+ rally off of those levels. So again, and really some interesting price action as well. Like on this bounce, it's obviously been a really strong move, but we've reclaimed back above this value area low, this range. Like, so I could mark this off for you just so you can see this a little bit easier. There. Mark this off, value area low, so that you can see that. Just basically extend it all the way over. And it's this prior month, multi-month range, starting from the end of November all the way until basically the third week, almost basically the end of February, where we spent consolidating here, making, we had this swing failure pattern here of this prior all-time high. There's a lot of crazy stuff happened in this, during these couple of months. Had a pullback. And now, again, this is a pretty strong move. Reclaiming this value area low of this prior range, it's a very good sign if you're bullish. But now what, right? So what now? That's kind of the question that we're going to dig into a little bit here and, see if we can kind of break it down a little bit. For me, there's a couple trade setups that I think are interesting, and I'll go over them with you for stuff that I'm particularly looking at. And, again, the first one, again, we're back in this multi-month range. It's a good sign. If I was to pull a fixed range of all of this data to include, all of the new stuff since we broke down from this range, you can see that the point of control, which is, we basically tested it. It was essentially an absolute perfect test of this 618. So the bottom of this little golden zone here, this is the golden pocket. If you do a fib retracement from the all-time high to our current swing low here, there's kind of a lot of data on my screen right now, but you can see that the 618, $96,011 is basically, we front ran it by like $30 or something like that. But so far, a really nice, level of resistance. So that's what this is. Basically, this is the golden pocket, the golden zone. And it happens to be extremely confluent with the point of control of not only the prior range that I talked about here, so I'll circle it so you can see it a little bit easier, but this prior range, but it's also the golden pocket of, what's developing to be like this entire range, right? Which could potentially, we could be trading in this range for a really long time. It's kind of like similar to this, right? Like we could be trading sideways for a lot longer than you probably want to, be trading sideways, and then before making your bigger decisive move. Wouldn't be that surprising. So anyway, back above value area low, we're at resistance. Kind of the first trade that is of interest to me. So I'm going under the assumption that if you're watching this video and you're not in a position, like what's the next move, right? Or if you're long, for instance, it's kind of like what would you want to see in order to, either to kind of like confirm again that you're still in a really good position, or maybe look to, find some level that might be a problem or be problematic if we start to lose that level. So, again, we're at resistance. One setup that I see right away that is pretty interesting to me is at least taking out this high from Friday, so last week's high, right? So it's literally this test into the 618 there. To kind of backtrack a little bit, off of the low, we moved up, and I think we spent like this is like 10 days or something like that going sideways before impulsive move. I mean, we have almost an equal amount of time that's spent here. Not that it has to literally, be a perfect, mirror image of this by any means. But, like we have spent some time here. We came into, a really significant time today having the monthly close take place, which, there's often some decent moves that come off the back of major closes like that. That we could maybe see something pretty decent tomorrow or the day after. It wouldn't surprise me that much. But again, we're consolidating under resistance. It's not a bearish thing at all. This is still a really nice move to the upside, and it's holding support really well. So again, you are holding the prior range value. Another thing that is really helpful as far as determining trend for me, obviously, I'm a big Ichimoku fan, so I'm going to throw this on there as well. And you can see that like how powerful this move really was, right? So, we obviously broke down outside of cloud, went sideways for a while, and then ultimately in one day we literally broke through and closed above. And you can see on a closing basis, if I zoom in a bit here, on a closing basis we are holding the top, basically above cloud and flipping that into support. So right away you have the value area low of the prior range that you've gained acceptance back inside. That's a good thing if you're bullish. And you're holding the top of cloud as support. That's also bullish, right? That's really good. So consolidating above resistance is usually a good sign. But so far, bulls have been unable to push above here. Like this is a perfect battle if you think about it, right? So it's like you have a lot of bullish signs, a lot of resistances that got pushed through, and again, these levels are being defended really well. On the flip side, though, you have, this is like a pretty, and again, this is how you get beautiful ranges, right? You get great. I mean, I think this is like a 3% range here, but it's just like a perfect kind of equilibrium of bulls and bears here, battling it out, and eventually one will give way, and then again, price will move up or down. It's kind of how it works. But anyway, one trade that I think, again, if I'm stepping into a trade and I haven't been in one, and I need to get in, I'm like begging to get in one. One trade that I see right away is I would love a run of this high right here. So this is looking for a short trade basically. And the reason being is, again, you have this point of control that is a very, very significant level. And as so far, arguably, like you could say you're testing the underside of this point control, like on this move up here. It's been a significant level going back to November of last year. It's very significant. The value area low of this prior range is being respected very well. Again, you got the move inside and it's been holding, right? So you have the nice confluence between the top of cloud and the value area low. It's holding very well. So to me, seeing this prior range level being respected that well is a good sign for me to think that the point of control is likely to be the same, right? It's gonna like and also reclaiming that, right? So it's kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but like I would look higher. I would not want to step in front of that. So anyway, going back to this particular setup, I would love for a push up into this region here. And there's a lot of things going on here, which again, you have a weekly that's technically it's untapped. You have a couple of dailies, which are lower time frame levels, but I really like these, especially for scalping. But you have like a lot of resistance here. So again, the point of control, you have the golden pocket, which you haven't actually like broke into yet. Not that you have to. To me, this is already a perfect test. Then you have, again, a couple of support resistance levels here that is kind of built up. You have your 1.618 expansion of this move is also sitting there. There's a lot of reasons to look at this region for, again, like it's going to be, to me, this is probably going to be a tougher level to pass through. And on the flip side of that, again, if you manage to break above this and hold, that's very, like, to me, that's pretty bullish. That would definitely land in the bulls' favor, in my opinion. And again, you probably see that bigger move probably up to where this monthly is, 102,000, something like that. But what I would love to see is literally a push up and then a failure. So either what would end up being kind of like a swing failure of this level, so this orange line going across, I know it's kind of hard to see, because I have all of these other lines here, but I would love to see like a push up and then a rejection off of like this cluster of resistance, right? It could go even a bit higher, who knows? But I'd want to see it come back into this range here. You see that? To me, that's a pretty good, you know, that's a pretty decent chance to look for a counter trade, or basically a short trade here. And your stop loss would be above, you know, whatever the wick high of that swing failure pattern is. That's where your stop goes, and then you would be looking for lower. Now, I think like that is a pretty good setup. I think, you know, for me, I would probably look to like lock in. So again, if I was given that, and again, you know, like I'd want to see not only the move up into resistance, but also the rejection. I would want to see it fail, right? You know, if you got a daily, we'll just keep like the same time frame here. If you got a daily close, right? If it moved up here and then closed, especially above like your point of control, that's not really something that I would want to step in front of. Meaning, like I would not want to counter trade that, because likely what's happening is you're getting a resistance and you're starting to see the resolution, right, and continuation. So like that would likely mean that we're going higher. You'd want to see something like this where you have a wick above, and then, you know, the close of the candle is below kind of like this 95,976 level, and then that would be, you know, again, that's not a guarantee by any means. And you know, there's some other things, I don't get like too much into it, but I'd want to see a few things fall into place in order to, you know, feel comfortable wanting to take that trade. And I think it's, you know, again, for those of you in VIP, or, you know, have been, I mean, geez, we've done over 150 live streams in there. You all know by now exactly like what I look for in that, and why I like those trades so much. But that would be kind of like the first setup. And then I would just be looking to take this back down to get to around the value area low. I probably wouldn't get overly excited about that. Just because, you know, like you could just be seeing this range develop, and who knows, we could be chopping here for another couple of weeks. Like we really don't know, right? So that's kind of like a, you know, I think it's a valid setup. I don't like overly like it, but it's there, and I think it's definitely a valid setup. Now to the downside, which is the other side of the trade. So again, that's basically that's really like the only short I see here that's somewhat, that I think I expect to be somewhat actionable in the next few days, for instance. So I'm going to try to keep it like lower time frame, right? And then the flip side of that is like, where would be a decent area to take along? Now, again, the first area of interest would probably be back down around this $93,200 region, back around the value or low this range, where, you know, all the time so far that it's been tested, you've got really nice bounces. If you're a scalper, I think that's a fair region to take a look at. I personally don't really think that, you know, again, if I had to pick a side of the trade I hope to see first, if I, you know, gun to my head, you have to take a trade, I would rather, you know, take the swing failure pattern if given, you know, running into resistance, failing, and then taking a short there versus trying to long this again. And the reason is, like, to, again, part of it too is like, this is such a small range. It's not like overly exciting for me to trade this at the moment. I would rather see like a deeper pullback, which I think is, you know, I think it's obviously certainly could happen. Where would that likely take place? It would be to me, it's basically losing these lows, right? Like kind of like these last three lows, and kind of like, I don't want to say it's a dead giveaway, but what would really raise the alarm for me is getting a close back inside a cloud. So again, you see this big green candle went right through it. All of these closures so far have all been above cloud. Yes, you've had wicks into cloud. You've had wicks into cloud multiple times, but every time so far, you've had it close well above, right? To me, a potential warning sign for bulls is that if you pull back to this cloud and you close a daily candle inside cloud, that would be a bit concerning. If I see that, I would be looking for a deeper pullback on that. So again, longing this region, like that's why I'm saying that. Like for me, longing down here isn't as attractive to me. I would rather wait for a different setup. considering you've had so many tests of this region now, I'd rather wait for a deeper pullback if given, to maybe try there. Again, since monthly close happened, you can take a look at some new monthly pivots, which maybe help. And you can see here right away that your new monthly pivot that just populated is basically the value area low. Let me zoom out a little bit. Now I got kind of a lot going on here. But this pivot, your new monthly pivot, is at the value area low of your entire range now. I love that confluence. And if you look back at the last time price was kind of chopping around below this level, you can see that it was a very big resistance, right? You see the wicks had a tough time getting back above, rolled over, came back up on this test, got rejected again, made a new low. And then here you kind of, again, poked up into it and then got your clean break. A lot of times when you see these SR flips, so again, if you go back to the support resistance, the free training modules that I have on YouTube, I walk you through all of this, you know, how like support and resistance levels come to be and whatnot. And like, this is a classic thing where you have a lot of tests, finally it breaks through, and sometimes it will pull back to give you the test, right? Like the retest before, you know, ultimately continuation, which in this instance could be a pullback back to this region and, you know, build up a little base of support and then try again to the upside, something like that. To me, that is a more interesting long if given versus trying to trade, you know, this kind of like smaller range that's been chopping around for like a week and a half now. You know, either like, again, like a clean kind of like move to the upside and a failure, that would be a nice short trade. To the downside, I would rather kind of see something deeper. And seeing this new monthly pivot here, 88,193, which basically perfect confluence with the value area low of the range. I like that, and like as some kind of, you know, back test. Would I set bids here? Absolutely not, though. And I'll like, part of the reason is being inside a cloud alone, like this would kind of signify a couple of things. It's just, for me, it's uncertainty. It's not necessarily like whether it's overly bearish or not, although I would argue it's not. Like, you know, I do think if you get a closure inside a cloud, it would kind of signal that, you know, again, it doesn't mean that it has to happen, but it would be a change of behavior here, and I would just be looking for a deeper pullback. But you know, this is something that like we could see what goes up quickly. You have a consolidation. You know, we could see a candle that is kind of, we've seen this before a lot of times, right? Like you can see a candle that is equally this nice, but red over here, right? We've seen that happen a bunch of times. So anyway, like this, I think that this is a nice area though to look for a potential long if given. I'm not saying that we're gonna come down here immediately by any means, but I'm just saying, like, one thing that would lead me to think that we're coming sub 90K is a closure inside a cloud. That's a pretty good warning sign. Especially, you know, if you start to see too much price action, I would say below this low. So 91.6, you start, especially a daily close below 91.6. I think that you at a minimum, you're probably going to become and testing this pivot. But to me first, so again, I gave you kind of like a short potential idea that I think is valid. I'm, you know, as far as like, do you expect, so like the probability that this ends in a swing failure pattern? I'm not like overly convinced that that's going to happen, because again, you've got a nice impulsive move to the upside, range, impulsive move, range. It's like, you know, it's hard to fight price action like this. And, you know, we had a pretty nice monthly close just now, but you can't also forget, again, like this is pretty heavy resistance here. You start to claim it though, again, it's going to look much better. And I do think that, you know, be working your way, which by the way, like your R1 pivot is at this monthly, right? So like this is, you know, like if you're watching this video in a couple of days or something, and let's say that we have resolution to the upside, that like this is definitely like a secondary target area of interest that I would be very interested in. Which I'm sure, like, so if I turn off Ichimoku, just because I want to like clean it up just a little bit, right? You've seen the cloud now. But if you take a Fibonacci retracement, you see your golden pocket, very, very, very well respected. Your 786 here at 101,881 is basically your R1 and your monthly, right? So you have like this, and by the way, your 2 expansion, which is just an equal move of this. So I can just draw that out for you so you can kind of visualize it. So it's taking, if you're measuring a fib expansion from here, your 2 expansion is just going to be an equal move of this. So you take this and then you move that to where you're measuring the top of this, right? And you see how that matches up. So this is where the pull is, and you're measuring an expansion of this. Okay. So anyway, and by the way, that also is in the free tutorials that I do. It's on YouTube. Tons of playlists on them. But anyway, so like that, it's nice Confluence. It's just a measured move of this. It's a perfect measured move, and it leads you right into, you know, this untapped monthly. You have a 786 here. You have your R1 pivot sitting here. It's like there's a lot of reasons to look at that level as like your next potential resistance. So if you break, I would say if you break really above 97,000, it's not a swing failure pattern. It's holding, right? You get daily close, starts chop around, and it's looking like this is going to resolve to the upside. The next real significant level of what I would expect to be resistance is going to be around 102,000. So just give you an idea of that. So yeah, let me see here. Kind of went over. So again, gave you kind of like a you know, an idea for a short to the downside. This is really the first level of interest that I would have around 88,200. If we get below that, and the thing about this, right? So like if you, let me kind of delete some stuff here just so it like cleans it up a little bit. Because there's kind of a lot going on. I can leave the rest there. Kind of like something that, you know, something that I want to point out, which is a little, it's not concerning because I mean, this has to happen. This, again, this looks good. But you have like a clear all-time high, right? It's obviously a clear high. This is a clear low. It's like, if you're bullish, one thing that I think should be in the back of your mind is the fact that, like, is this just a reversion, right? So we've made a clear high, had quite a bit of weakness. You know, obviously it's been a hectic, you know, first part of the year. We got a new president. You know, the market's getting used to a lot of things all over again, and so there's a lot of, like, you know, a lot of news going on, and you know, again, like, is this a lower high? So you have a high, you have a low, and then are we coming up for essentially a trap, right? Like a lower high, and then we ended up making new lows. I don't really know, to be fair, but I'll tell you that one level that would not be a good thing. Actually, it's this. So I wanted to put this back on. Bear with me. Losing 88.2, so 88,200, and basically getting back below your range value again, that would be, it's not the end of the world, but that would be very concerning, I would say. If I see this happen, especially losing your pivot, losing your value area low of this entire range, and you start to trade back below here, it's like, you could come, like, I think there's a very good chance that we would see this monthly get hit down at 82,000. Doesn't mean that the world's over. Could this just be another pullback and base before another attempt higher? Yes. But again, just looking at market structure, like just looking at the larger structure, you know, it's like interesting timing too with it being May. So, you know, there's all, you know, I'm sure everybody's heard the phrase "sell in May, go away." You know, I don't know how much that is going to play into this, but it's like you kind of have like the potential for seasonality coming into play as well. But yeah, it's like, let's just say losing 88,200, I think that would be a lot of alarm bells. And I would definitely be looking for a much deeper pullback. And then you're kind of at that point hoping that it bases here, right? This trend line did a pretty good job. It wasn't perfect, you know, but it like picked up on a closing basis. It was perfect. like, you know, obviously didn't pick up like you know, these wicks or whatnot. I'll just say though that like if this gets broken, I would be very concerned for a much deeper pullback, which I will save that for a different video. Because honestly, it's not that relevant till today anyway. Today, I just really wanted to focus purely on here, right? And kind of like you have two setups staring at you in the face, basically. And you know, aside from that, you know, there's some clear levels to the downside. So like again, starting with that short I talked about to the you know, that's basically sitting right here at this point of control, some kind of swing failure pattern. Um, that could give you kind of a nice entry, a pull, or you know, vice versa if you're patient and you don't want a long here, which I would completely understand that. You know, looking for a pullback down to a nice support region like this, I think that's another potentially good trade. It's just really important that you also know like where you're like where those trade ideas are likely not right, you know. And then if you're expanding that out, so again, what, you know, who knows? Like things could go crazy. We could get a big move up out of here or down. And just like your secondary levels for me, again, to the downside is this monthly. I think that if we lose 88,200, the floodgates are, you know, you kind of could have a magnet here at this monthly around, you know, 82,500, something like that. Again, I don't expect that to happen today or tomorrow necessarily, but, you know, sometime in the month of May, if we were to lose 88,200, I think that's a very significant level to be aware of. And then to the top side, again, if this does not end in weakness, if we don't get a swing failure pattern, if we get a nice impulsive move, you know, maybe we get something similar to this. See, like, you know, some candle like this that kind of like takes us up into this region, and you know, and we end up kind of like grinding and working our way higher. Then the next real significant level of interest for me would be at 102,000. So that's the end of the Bitcoin analysis. You know, it's been a while since I've done one publicly and alone. Usually I have my, you know, the people in the private chat that are in there asking me questions and whatnot. So, you know, basically that's the end of that. So the announcement piece. I have quite a few videos that never made it to the public because like I did them for VIP. And again, we've done over 150 live streams that are all private. Now they're not very relevant now because, you know, we're obviously talking about like old price action. So I don't feel the need to release any of that stuff just again, because it's a lot of it's just like analysis that mattered then, you know, at the time. I think there was like a ton of great concepts. Maybe from like a concept and a learning standpoint, those would be kind of cool to watch. But aside from that, you know, I don't think they add like too much more too much value outside of you know, basically the concept learning. But I have some tutorials. So if you're familiar with my tutorials, I'm pretty in depth, and I like to spend a lot of time talking about, you know, and trying to make sure that people really have like, you know, have the chance to have a good understanding of whatever concept that I'm explaining. So I will be releasing those. They kind of got mixed in with all of the live streams. So it was honestly like it was just for me not knowing that I actually didn't release those publicly because they got kind of mixed in with all of the other videos that I did. But I will be releasing those the rest of those over the coming weeks. And you know, there's a few. I will definitely do one tomorrow. Probably start with the risk management and finish that out. And so that's kind of like the first announcement is that I want to, you know, the stuff that is unreleased, I want to, you know, that's in the vault. I want to make those public. That way people can watch those because I think they're, you know, I put a lot of time and effort into these. And, you know, I think like there's, you know, I think it hopefully can be helpful for people. And then the kind of like the second announcement I have is I'm gonna finish those tutorials. So there's some topics that I haven't even started yet. And you know, I realize, you know, for me, I've taken quite a long break. I don't know how much I want to get into it now. You know, I've taken a break from doing a lot of from doing public content, and you know, I've been, you know, for the last few years, I basically we have a small kind of close knit group of people that have turned into friends, and you know, people we know each other pretty well. And you know, like I said, I've done over 150 streams for that group of people. But you know, for me, I think getting back into doing public videos again is a good way to encourage myself to put in the work that needs to be done to get all the tutorials done. So that's something that I want to do. And I kind of like miss the public videos to a degree. Because they are fun to do, and I know when I was doing them, definitely had we had a lot of interest in that. So it's something that I want to get back to. And I just want to say again that I appreciate everybody who's stuck around and who's checked on that's basically checked on message me and all that stuff over this time. And yeah, like if people have questions, I'm happy to answer them. I already know one question that I'm gonna get is like what's up with the bots, and I'm happy to answer all of that stuff. And I mean, I'll give you a very quick answer right now because I already know I'm gonna get. That's probably the first comment I'm gonna get is like, "How come you haven't been talking about bots?" The simple answer, and I'm happy to go into way more detail on that, but the simple answer to that is it became really difficult for me to participate. That's the simple answer. And what I mean by that is, a few years ago, if you remember all the stuff that was going on, you had FTX go down, you had Binance getting in trouble, and like there was all this stuff happening. As being in the US, it's very difficult. It was very, very difficult at the time to have enough access to exchanges to trade the things that I want to. So that's the simple answer, is that it just became really tough to be a participant. And like if you are outside of the US and you had access to all those exchanges, like I was very, very jealous of you, first of all. But it's like when you have exchanges like Coinbase, for example, like at the time, it's not so bad now. But at the time, it just was like they weren't listing things fast enough. It was very difficult to get a Coinbase listing for most altcoins. And they were very picky about that. Well, say they were super picky about some things, not others, but like they were, there just wasn't a ton of variety of stuff that I had access to and that I was wanting to, wanting to trade. All the good stuff was on the KuCoins of the world, which KuCoin went KYC, so we couldn't use that. Bybit, Femex, Binance, like all these other exchanges that like they list, I mean, geez, you pay the toll, you get listed basically, right? Like it was like, there was a lot of fun stuff to trade. But when you lose access to all of that, it just made it really difficult to have enough. And if you were familiar with the bot stuff that I was doing, like I was running a lot of deals and on a lot of different pairs. And when you're kind of like handicapped so severely, and even at the time, it's like Coinbase was like not the most fun to be on. I'd argue they got a lot better, which I'm sure people have opinions on that. But like, yeah, it became very difficult to like sustain the strategy that I was using for myself, right? And when you lose access to basically all of the exchanges that you were trading on. So anyway, that's one simple answer. There's more to it than that, for sure. But anyway, like for me, it just became like it was very challenging to figure that out. And then it just became, again, like when you took them offline, or I took them offline because again, like I was having difficulty finding stuff that I actually wanted to trade, and Coinbase's fees were not the most friendly at all, compared to the stuff that I've been used to. And like the majority of my volume was on there, so I was getting volume discounts trading elsewhere, and then it was just like it just seemed like kind of a big hurdle. Um, but yeah, look, and like that's not to say that if like people have bought question, or like who knows, like maybe now, because I would say Coinbase is they've certainly like picked up, and I would say that with our new leader in place, our new president, it's sure, and the SEC getting rid of Gensler, that type of stuff is like I think it seems like the floodgates are kind of opening to be able to have more stuff that's interesting to trade on exchanges like Coinbase. But yeah, it's not to say that I won't do bots again or that I wouldn't. I did very, 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 very well with them. But how I was running things, how I was running my bots, the strategies that I was using for myself, like to get it relied on volatility, it relied on stuff, and like most importantly, it relied on me believing or wanting to trade that pair. And it's like when I look at some of the pairs that I would have had to trade, I just looked at that. I'm like, I don't want to trade these. So like, if I don't want to trade it, I just turn them off. It's like I gotta want to trade that stuff. Um, so anyway, that's probably a lot more long-winded answer, I guess, than I thought I would give. But I do think it's important because I'm sure that like people are wondering or people are going to ask me about it. But yeah, it's not to say that I like don't ever want to talk about bots again, everything. I'm not personally doing them right now for that reason. And I mean, and another thing too is, I mean, I think in one year I had like 280,000 transactions. The other year I had like 200 something thousand. Like for like doing tax stuff, that was not easy. That was definitely not that was not very easy. But shout out to um yeah, it's in a link in the description below. But like they did a good job handling the amount of transactions that I had. My goodness, like, and I'll tell you, like, it's still tough to have to like have those in your folder, like have those like be calculated. It takes forever for my stuff to update. But that's like a small thing. But again, it's like there was more reasons for me to not want to do it at the time, and then it kind of just became like it's like I was really like just enjoying trading, scalping ranges. I was enjoying, when I wasn't scalping ranges, taking breaks from doing that. I had some really nice swing trades. So it's like it's just easier to, it was easier for me fit in with kind of like what I wanted to do. And with again the bots, it just became it was more of a challenge. Just I didn't feel like I wanted to micromanage, worrying about altcoin pairs that I just didn't want to trade. And like that, I didn't necessarily think were good pairs to trade anyway. So it just seemed like not the best area for me to want to have any capital allocated to at the time. But again, for those of you like who didn't or who like have access to like the full range of exchanges, the decision would definitely have been a lot easier for me. But then also like during during bear market, when you're looking at bear market, to me like the bots are again they're a bit different trading, right? It's like I wouldn't want to have been running long only strategies, for example. It's like so like I'd have to have the ability, or you would just I would have wanted or needed more flexibility with my trading, my exchanges that I had access to be able to take full advantage of that. So anyway, long-winded answer, but hopefully that does clear it up, because I'm sure that question was coming anyway. So I just wanted to talk about that for a little bit, and then yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. And so the final announcement is, again, like I've said forever, I've said since day one, the reason why I made this channel is because I love technical analysis, and that's my passion. That's what I've been doing for a very long time. That's what I have the most experience in. And again, it's what I love to talk about. It's, you can ask anybody in VIP. Again, we don't know, over 150 streams. I love to talk about that. Our streams are hours long sometimes. So that's what this channel will be about. And again, if I see some interesting opportunities elsewhere outside of like pure technical analysis, I'll definitely share them. But again, hopefully it's a good fit for everybody. And the Discord, other social media avenues that I've had, that will definitely be focused on that. And I have made some changes in regards to that. But anyway, kind of rambling on at this point. Just wanted to, and again, if anybody ever wants to have like a Q&A, or like, if anybody is curious about, certain things, feel free to ask me. I'll answer. No worries there. And anyway, hopefully, I'll be back later in the week to do another update for you all. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you out there. Trade safe, and we'll see you on the next one.